I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us. So I'm excited to talk with Meg Groseclose. She and I have known each other for a while. She did one-to-one coaching. She was in our coaching institute. I'm writing this book with John Campbell and Christian Van Newberg on the New Leader's Guide for Coaching in Schools, the second edition. And I wanted to write a chapter on instructional coaching. And I wanted to find one story to include that would sort of capture what it's all about. And
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Definitely been a big fan for all the years, and it's been so great working with you and getting to know you. Uh, Definitely been great.
hey, I'm a fan of you. So tell us a bit about yourself. What did you, before you came to be a coach, what's your sort of quick history?
Yeah, so I have an undergraduate degree in elementary education and then a master's in reading. I started as a classroom teacher. Kindergarten is where I began, moved to first grade, moved to second grade. And then I began working as a Title I interventionist in both reading and math. During that time, I kind of started working with teachers as like a mentor. Enjoyed working with beginning teachers, and that's kind of where it led me to coaching. Became the lead mentor for my school, and so I had a whole bunch of mentees under me, and a coaching opportunity opened up, and I thought, I really like working with adult learners. Why not try this? So from there, I became an instructional coach. I did a little literacy coaching. Currently an early literacy facilitator, but still kind of like a literacy coach would be kind of the aspect. That's my area.
Very cool. So how did you come to learn about instructional coaching? And remind me of the things you did. I think you did the virtual institute, and then we did one-to-one coaching. But tell me about what you did, and then if it was helpful, how it worked out for you. It'd be kind of a bummer if you said no, it wasn't helpful at all. But at any rate, what's the scoop?
Yeah. So I feel like when I was kind of edging into instructional coaching, it was kind of first it started as me just kind of reading books and kind of learning a little bit more. So it was super helpful to me to actually attend a professional development that was centered around the beliefs of the impact cycle and things like that, because I feel like it's one of those jobs where sometimes you don't have all the guidance and making it what it should be. So I started with, beyond reading your books, taking the institute, which was super helpful to me because it kind of opened the doors of like, what does it look like in this school? What does it look like in this state, in this country? I kind of became familiar with like using more of like social media platforms, which I think is where I like reached out to you to see if you had any research that you were interested in partnering with me. It was so helpful though, because each week had a different topic, a different focus, and it kind of guided us through what we needed to do. And I was able to learn with you guys, talk, collaborate, and then go in and practice those while I was there. So that was super helpful. And I really enjoyed the Institute. And then after the Institute, offered this if you're still interested in learning more, you could be a learning partner. And I thought that was a cool concept and idea. So I immediately was like, yeah, sign me up. And so I started kind of, if you had a research project or if you just needed a coach or just needed something, of course, I was a little bit anxious about it, I guess, because I just didn't know and hadn't been doing it so long. So, but it was helpful for me to learn and grow through that. So I reached out as your learning partner, kind of collaborated. And then I think was it like last year? I think I reached out on Twitter and was like, do you have any additional research? And you're like, actually, I want to try something. And so the one-to-one coaching was the best because the more I've, like, reflected on myself as a coach, we have evaluators, we have principals and district leads and things like that, and they're so helpful, but I wanted someone who could kinda walk alongside me and support me along the way and to kind of hold me accountable and to push me and challenge me outside of my comfort zone, to try some of the things, and so you were there for me for that. So you followed my story, you followed, a coaching cycle, and, some things that we hadn't tried, we were, willing to try, or just to give it a try, you know? So it was cool to have that support right there. So it was like we would do something, and then I could follow up with you. "This is how it happened. What do you think?" And then you would give me feedback, and then we could go back. And the teacher also became invested too, because she was like, "Oh, what did he say? What should we try?" So it was a win-win for everyone, really was.
So, well, I felt like I was a learning partner because I learned so much from you, and so to me, it was very, very much collaborative. Tell me about the teacher that you worked with, the one we're going to talk about today, the coaching cycle you did with her.
Yeah. So when we reached out and it was like, oh, I want to try this, I thought, who should we do it with? I had a few coaching cycles going on. Rachel was the one I kind of reached out to and was like, would you be willing to kind of partner with me for this work? She was a third year teacher at my school. She had spent some time in Harlem teaching, and then came back down. We're in North Carolina. So she was here at our school. And she was willing. So, I usually send out a survey to my teachers in the beginning, middle, and end of the year to see who has interest in a coaching cycle. That's kind of my start. And she had expressed interest. We had a new curriculum coming, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in learning a little bit more and partnering with you to really understand this new curriculum." And so I was like, "This is a perfect time." On top of that, I was also her mentor, so we were kind of building that trust and relationship. And so she was eager to do it, and so that's how Rachel became in it.
Well, very cool. So the impact cycle is what you did with her, and we did the one-to-one coaching on that too. So I would tell you about one part of the impact cycle. You'd heard about it in the institute, but I think the follow-up somehow makes it. I've heard that it makes it deeper, and it's more how do I apply it this week to what I'm doing. But we went through the impact cycle, and the first part of the impact cycle, that identify part, has three parts: identifying a clear picture of reality, identifying a goal, identifying a strategy. Now, when Rachel came to you, she thought she was going to focus on something, but then you looked at reality, and I think you altered your goal a little bit, if I remember correctly. So how did you go about getting a clear picture of reality to start? How did you do that?
Yeah, and again, kind of so I feel like she came in and was like, "All right, big picture, I want help with this curriculum. I need help with this ELA support," because I was the literacy coach at the time. And, so I was like, "Okay, well, we have to kind of, like, narrow that down and see what that looks like, so that current reality." And I went to my go-to at the time, which would have been the observation just to kinda see what it's looking like. "Let me join your ELA block, and I'll take some notes." I usually use, like, a T chart that says, teacher move and then student impact. So, like, what are we doing and how is that impacting, our students positively? And so we did that. And as we were kind of in the midst of this lesson, and kind of going through it, what we noticed was, that the students weren't so engaged and it was a longer lesson. And so it was like, what can we do to increase that engagement? And then at the end of the lesson, too, to kind of know, like, what do they know? Going through, like, we were just a little bit unsure of, like, did they understand the concept of what we were trying to present that day, right? So I went back to you and I remember saying we did this. This is kind of where we were. And you suggested we do the video. So I had never tried that. And I was like, all right, let's try it. So I used the identify questions and the watch yourself and watch your students. And through that, it was like really clear to see it on video of the students that were just through this 90-minute block, what portions of the lesson we were kind of losing them at, and why they were not maybe on task or engaged in the lesson. So that kind of became our two-part goal was we wanted to increase student engagement or student achievement, but we thought engagement would kind of be like that realm of like, we have to amp this up to try to increase the achievement, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And so what did the goal end up being when you sat down with her and you went through those identify questions and you tried to set a peers goal? Do you remember what you set as the goal?
Yeah, I said it with her, so she was like we were deciding, we are like, we wanna see, I think it was I wrote it down, students would be proficient with, a standard-based question 90% of the time. And again, the curriculum, it ends with a question, so sometimes we would take that question and use that, but then sometimes there wasn't, so we really had to think about if we're gonna use a standard-based question, then we would have to implement that. So that was part of our learn that kinda led into that, if that makes sense.
It does. So to measure engagement, essentially, the kids couldn't answer the question unless they were engaged. Is that the
Yeah.
idea?
And we thought too, so if we're engaged within this lesson, then our achievement is going to increase, right?
Right.
So we were trying to decide how we could increase engagement and then also be measuring their student achievement. So we're measuring our engagement through are we grasping the concepts as well too.
So then after you've got the goal, the next part of identify, there's reality. Where am
Mhm.
I now? There's the
Mhm.
goal. Where do I want to get to? The third part is how am I going to get there? So what was the strategy you landed on to help her get to the goal?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was we implemented we were like, okay, well, we'll look at our land portion of our lesson at the end of our lesson. Let's see the questions that they ask, and we will use that question to kind of guide were they grasping. So each lesson is based on a standard. And so from that standard, there's a question. And if there wasn't a question, then we made the question. So we had that. And then we were to increase engagement. We started thinking about what we could do. So the program that we use in itself has these instructional routines that are they're kind of embedded into the lesson, but again, it was year 1, and so we were like, "We're gonna definitely follow this program with fidelity, and we're gonna really amp up those, different instructional routines." So such things as, like, gallery walks, graffiti walls, Socratic seminars, and so by really focusing on those, we were gonna increase our engagement and make sure we were doing those things, so that is just the fidelity of the program, but then we added in, like, a layer of using some of the Kagan structures to
Mm.
bring in that cooperative learning, and what we found was that the students, like, she was doing more of the work too, so it was like, who's doing the work? And, Rachel was doing a lot of the talking, and so it was like, with increased engagement, we're gonna have to release a lot of that to the students, and so implementing those cooperative learning structures to get them to be more active participants in the lesson.
Mm.
So we threw out some question stems. Like, again, we're kind of like in the midst of like measuring the tickets. Like, how are we doing? How is our standard based question going? And then if we're not quite where we should be, what could we do? And so we would kind of sit down week by week. Our goal was lofty at 90%. And our initial baseline was 64%
Ye-
before we did any of the changes. We were just following the curriculum as it goes. So, and I wouldn't even say change, it was more like a modification, just based on the needs of our students, we were, doing a few different things to try to increase that engagement, providing sentence stems, using like a progression of talk, modeling, examples, non-examples, were kind of some of the things that we did. And all within this learn aspect, we're co-planning, we're co-teaching together. Um,
Mhm.
and having a second set of eyes because like the video is reflective of like, oh, like when we have a second person in there, we can really see who's on task, who's not.
So the progression of talk, that's what you would model as a different kind. And progression of talk is kinds of conversations students can have with each other. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's like basic sentence stems and it kind of advances to like just simply restating or clarifying and kind of going through. So we would look through, we would have those sentence stems and then we would like introduce one per week and model what that looks like, sounds like. So a lot of like thinking aloud, modeling our thinking, having examples, having non-examples, and then gathering evidence. So beyond the exit tickets that we were collecting weekly or daily, I'm sorry, we were also doing anecdotal notes. So we had like a teacher, not a teacher, it was like little boxes and I had each student labeled in each one. So like if she was the one in the lesson teaching, then I could kind of go around and listen to what I was hearing. And so we were kind of grasping like what the kids were doing in the moment and then looking at the exit ticket at the end and seeing we saw trends too. We saw similar students that were like constantly, not making the we're not able to answer the question. So having that second person in the room, it was helpful to be like, okay, I noticed these 5 kids are always struggling. What can we do? How can we support for them? And maybe like just even having that additional teacher in the room is always helpful.
Mm. So, so the second part of the cycle, there's 3 parts. First part's identify. Identify is let's get a clear picture of reality. Let's set a goal. Let's identify strategies. Then in the learning part, you help the person learn how to do it. Now, the Kagan strategies, you had a booklet that Kagan's developed that has pretty explicit description. You didn't have checklists necessarily, but there was pretty clear descriptions of how to do the different structures. And
Yep.
then you had other materials to support the progression of talk.
Mhm.
Um, so you went through those materials with Rachel, and then it sounds like co-teaching. You didn't really necessarily model the strategies, but co-teaching seemed like the way to go. That's how you got those things in place. Is that how it went?
Yeah, we did. I think I did model like 1 or 2 lessons, but then we really found we used your co-teaching form. The lessons are long and there's different portions. So it was like being able to identify where we were losing kids in their engagement and in their understanding of the concepts. We were able to kind of like, okay, maybe I'll model that section. So I'll co-teach and I'll do this portion and you do this portion. So we were very specific on like timing and places. But yeah, we would co-teach the lessons and co-plan them together. There was a little modeling in the beginning, but we kind of progressed into that co-teaching.
And then how often did you gather the data on was it every day and answer to the questions every day?
So yeah, she had the kids write the answers on a sticky note, and we started with, again, we like every week when we would meet to like sort the data, we had started with open-ended questions because again, this is second grade. So we were just responding to a question, which was helpful to see like were they able to write a sentence to respond to the question. We added in some multiple choice questions as well too, and we would collect those daily. So she had a chart on the board with each of the kids' initials, and the kids would then just write their sticky, what their answer would be at the end of the lesson, and then put it up. And then she would build upon those and we would gather them. She might do a like a quick glance just to see are they getting it, are they not at the end of the day. But we would meet about once a week and like sort the stickies. So we had three columns. We had mastered, and then we had progressing, and then we had not mastered. So we would sit together and like look at the students and how they were scoring and kind of go. And we kept the progressing there because again, if it was open-ended, they might have a portion of it correct, but just not 100% mastered. Now, when it became multiple choice, it was pretty clear whether we got it or didn't get it. But usually there's one or two answers that just don't make sense anyway. So if they were choosing kind of like a answer that was kind of near it, that was good. So we were stacking the data that way and then counting and calculating.
Now that all takes place in the improvement stage. You start to gather the data, you start to look at what's happening, you figure out where the students are. They don't usually just go from 60 to 90% overnight. You have to make adjustments. You've mentioned some of the adjustments, but could you tell us again, kind of in the improvement stage, you're constantly modifying and adapting. Sometimes you change the strategy, sometimes you add strategies, sometimes you change how you teach strategies. What were some of the changes you made along the way so that you could get closer and closer to the goal? As you saw the results, how did you make adaptations?
Yeah. I'm gonna look back at my notes because I ended up using your next step planning form, which was helpful because again, she had a lofty goal of 90% and we just weren't quite there yet. Our baseline was 64%. So the first time, again, it was kind of modeling thinking aloud. We did the code teaching, we added in the multiple choice, and then it was giving them more time to orally discuss was our next jump. We were like, "You know what? Maybe we need some time." Like we're just giving them the question and then they're writing an answer. So maybe if we add in that discourse, which we've been embedding into the lessons, so why don't we add in that time to let them kind of orally discuss what it's going to be or think about it with a peer and then come to their answer. So that kind of pulls in that Kagan cooperative learning structure. Let's see, what else did we do? We thought about the strategies that we were embedding with the discourse and we were throwing the stems out as we were going. Um, and really, I think in the beginning, we were really just following the program with fidelity with the instructional routines. So then adding in the Kagan as we were going and getting them to be more of those cooperative learning structures to kind of go. So really the cooperative learning with the discourse embedded into the fidelity of the program that we were already doing. And then modeling our thinking aloud were some of the big things that we like added as we went through. But we would meet weekly and see where we were at. And we went from 64 to 70 to finally 88. And this is kind of in a span of about like 6 weeks or so that we would collect the data and kind of go through.
So six to just to sum well, first off, the changes you made. So you look you started with the curriculum and then you said we if I'm getting this right, we need to add more to the curriculum. So you use Kagan strategies and you had a little pamphlet with some of the key strategies that were clearly explicitly described. And then the progression of talk, was that something you were always planning to do, or did you add that partway through, or how did that start to get integrated in?
Yeah, we added that kind of within because I think our first thing was how do we increase engagement, which was using the instructional routines, which there's so many and they're great. But then just kind of like being a little bit more clear with defining like what does it look like, sound like to work cooperatively with our peers using some of those Kagan structures. But then again, sometimes you put kids in a group and there's just no, they just don't have the, like, they're not speaking and there's a lot of silence. So we would hear that. So then it was like, what can we do? We think they need a scaffold. So why don't we add in some stems that we can model and think aloud? And then we had like an anchor chart with those stems that we're just constantly building so they could kind of refer back to it. So they had that visual. And I think using examples and non-examples is key to kind of do that as you're going through what that sounds like, what that looks like, thinking aloud, and then just being there with them. So having two hands in the classroom. So when we were code teaching, one was able to kind of lead and the other was able to kind of walk around, listen, and support as needed. And then knowing we had about the five kids that were just struggling, like over like every time we would do the tickets, they were just not. So then what can we do for that small group? Like how can we support them? What additional scaffolds would they need to be successful? So kind of looking at the big picture of the classroom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's just evidence of the power of data. You can see
Yeah.
which kids are getting it, which kids aren't, and what they're getting or not getting are directly tied to the standards for
Yeah.
achievements. You're able to see, are the kids actually learning the content? And they went from 64% of the kids who were understanding the standard-based curriculum to 70% of the kids who understood it to 88% of the kids. So almost 90%.
Yeah.
And didn't you think that 90% was like an overly ambitious goal, or do I have that wrong?
No, I mean, I let her because, of course, we were partnering together with it, and when we made the peer goals, like, "What do you think we should, choose?" And she was like, "90%," like, she was, like, at it. So I was like, "Okay, like, let's do it." So I knew it was, like, a lofty goal, and that's why the next planning form was helpful for me and for her, I hope, because, you might could feel down if you're just sitting at 64% and you're like, "Whew, 90's far," but chunking it, we would kinda sit and be like, "Okay, we're at 64. What do you think is, like, doable for next week?" And I think she said, to 80, and then we ended up at 70. So, like, we kinda chunked it along the way, and then I would always ask her, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how committed to this goal? Because 'Cause I'm not in her classroom every day. I would try to be in there multiple times per week, but there were times when I was not in there. And she was like, "I'm 5." And so, of course, if she had said anything lower, like, if she had given me a 3, then it would've been like, "Well, what do we need to do to alter this? Like, what are some of the things that we can do to make this goal, you committed to this goal?" And so I think her commitment level and chunking it per se, and just like baby steps, adding some things along the way and kind of seeing how it was going. Again, a new curriculum, so we're already kind of new to what we're presenting, but it was a great time to take the instructional routines that are embedded into this curriculum and to use them, right? We already were, but of course you can always do it better. In our first year, there's a lot of learning. And so it was really a great time to kind of partner with her and support, and then just throw in some of those Kagan and some of that discourse, and to really think about like who's doing the work. And that was kind of like the eye-opening thing from the beginning, was that she felt like I was talking for 90 minutes and the kids just were sitting there or not, off task. And so that was kind of the thing, was like, we have to increase this engagement because if we don't, we're going to lose them. But yeah, exactly what you said too, because each of the lessons is embedded with the standard. So we were just connecting back. We were using our like Department of Instruction has some question stems that go with each standard. So we were clear to like, if we're using, RL 2.1, then let's use the standard that goes with that, the basic STEM. So we can be sure that we're addressing the needs of what was supposed to be taken out of this lesson.
And then the assessment of the class and the assessment of Rachel turned out to be pretty positive. What were the results there? And what's the assessment that was used?
So um, they're measured, based on their data, based on their growth. So again, we're looking at reading data, and she has what's called in our state like EVOS data, and she met her growth, and so they put it like on a little bar of like whether you're meeting growth on the positive end or the negative end, and she met growth on the positive end at 1.83. And 2.0 would have been exceeding growth. So she was 0.17 away from exceeding growth, which is huge, showing that her kids had performed throughout the school year. And this, of course, our phonics instruction goes into that play as well too. But this test involves phonics instruction, involves comprehension, and what we were working on was primarily like comprehension. Um, so she did that, which was amazing. So she was super excited to push through and have such high growth. A different assessment than what we were doing with the exit tickets, but again, her overarching goal, her overarching scores were so well, so that was amazing.
And then word spread about your success, and you were asked to go share the ideas in a couple places. So, where did you end up talking about the results?
Yeah, so our school, is a low performing school. We're actually a CSI school, which is a comprehensive support, improvement plan, I think is what it's called. But so we were the bottom 5% of the state in growth. So when we came into the school, we were super low. The school had negative growth. So the same growth that we're talking about for Rachel's positive 1.83, our school had originally before us a negative 2.4. So they were backwards on this end. And the year before that, negative 4.2. So we came in, changed leadership, changed the instructional team, and we moved up. So our school went from an F school to a D school and positive 1.5 growth. Went from the bottom 5% in growth in the state to the top 35% in growth, not in proficiency, but in growth for the state. So that was huge. So we'd had conversations with district and we'd had conversations with the Department of Instruction in our state. And the first conversation was with the district, and they had come in. They do these kind of like checks where they just come and talk to us about our data and where we're sitting. And so we talked, and my principal asked for me to talk about like the coaching cycles and how it works and what we're doing. And so I shared a little bit about Rachel's story and kind of the work. Like she's just one of the teachers that I work with. But again, you can see like the big picture of the school and the growth we've made. And so she asked if I wouldn't mind coming to present at the coaches or the principals meeting. And so I was like, okay. And so they followed up, and me and another coach, we came out and we were like, what should we do? So we kind of made it as like this conversation, like a walk through like what we did. And we went through the 3 stages and kind of talked about like setting goals, and the things we did to learn. And, when the principals saw the data, they were like, what? 'Cause they know our school and they know how hard it can be sometimes. And they were like impressed with the data. I had principals, reaching out or logging onto our presentation, which was really cool to see. So we presented, and it was an optional session too. So it was at their principals meeting, they had like an optional PD session. And so we did 2 of them, and we had a full room for both sessions, which was really cool. And it was kind of just a sit down table, just a discussion, kind of like now about the conversation. So from that, the lead of the like elementary reading, like the coaches lead, she asked for us to come out, and she was like, can you share this with the coaches in the district? So at the monthly coach meeting, we went out and we presented again. And told my story of one, and one of my peers told her story of another teacher she was working with. And the same thing, we kind of talked about, how you can partner with teachers and how you can set these goals and partner alongside them and just make adjustments and grow as you go. And then from that discussion, so since we are a low performing school in the CSI realm, DPI comes out and talks to us to the Department of Instruction for the state. So they came out and we told our story, and they were just so impressed at all of the things, the fact that we've gone from the D or the F to the D and from the negative growth to the positive growth. And they were like, we would love for you to share your story. Like, you're going to be exiting out of the CSI realm. We're still low performing until we can exceed growth, hopefully this year. But um, maybe you can tell the story to schools in the state that are going to be entering into this, bracket of schools that are this like kind of turnaround, with their, they need a turnaround. And so we were like, yeah, we'd be happy to come out and share our story. So, because they were like, this is so positive, from all the things. And we've done big things, it's not just the coaching cycles, but it's been big. But that's definitely been an aspect, is just having teachers to have support and someone who can be there in the classroom and partner alongside you has been so key. So, and then, yeah, I've just enjoyed kind of reaching out and like, I feel like, Twitter or X and, social media and just learning from coaches around the world. I think that's one of the reasons why I love, partnering with you and with just learning, because like everyone does things in different ways, and there's so much you can learn. I just love it. So the doors are just always open.
That's good. Well, I think we'll stop there. That's a great closing. Meg, it's so validating to listen to your story, to hear all the ideas that are being put into practice. And then it was
Well,
great to hear what it meant for Rachel, and then hearing about now you're actually talking to the state about what an impact you've had. It's really a wonderful story, and just one of many stories you've got to tell about the people you work with. So I'm so grateful for all you're doing.
well, thank you. And really partnering with you was such a help. Like, I think all coaches need someone to be alongside them. Like, it's just so helpful. We have teachers that are alongside us, and we need someone to be alongside us along the way, to be our thought partner. And so just having that thought partner, I was like, this is what we need. We need that accountability hand. We need that thought partner. We just need someone right there on the other side.
That sounds great. Thanks, Meg.
Of course.